Welcome back to another episode of The Wild Way Home. I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about my story and how it's relevant, how it applies to you, because I like to use my story as a teaching example. What I'll do is I'm going to walk you through the journey that I have been on so that you learn a little bit more about me, but also maybe a little bit more about you. Have you ever been guilty of avoiding tough conversations, of staying quiet to avoid escalation, maybe in your family or in a romantic relationship, of softening, diluting, or retracting your truth mid sentence when you're in the middle of saying it? Have you ever endured raised voices or contempt or ridicule without standing up for yourself? Have you ever been in the situation where things are chaotic and you took the blame just to restore the calm, even if you were the one that got hurt? Are you guilty of managing the room or not pushing back when somebody pushes at you? Or maybe it's less shrinking and it's more of a comparative lens. You're chronically comparing yourself to others. You think other people are better than you. Maybe because of that measuring stick, you accept disrespectful behavior or you allow people to talk down to you. Maybe you stay quiet and you chronically compare yourself in the background. You've got a relational hierarchy running in the background at all times so that you know how you compare to everyone else in the room. Maybe you feel grateful just to be chosen, or in your life or in your relationship, you feel behind or inferior or just not there yet. Maybe in your relationship, you see your partner as a prize that maybe you don't even deserve, or as someone who's ahead of you that you have to earn. Maybe they're more advanced, more desirable, more accomplished. Maybe they're attractive and you're not. You pedestal them and pit yourself. Maybe it looks like chronically letting other people set the tone, the pace, and the terms of your relationships, of your conversations. Or maybe it just looks like downplaying your needs to maintain approval. These are all things that I'm familiar with, and that's why this is relevant, because I know it relates to you too on some level. That's why you're here. At one point, I looked up and I found myself in a pattern of relationships that had been toxic or high conflict, aggressive, abusive, whatever word I wanted or felt comfortable using to describe it at the time. But there was a common theme among them. I went from relationship to relationship feeling unseen, feeling like I had to sacrifice myself for happiness of the relationship, even tolerating disrespect or things that I wasn't comfortable with. And the further along I got from relationship to relationship, the reference point moved. The next relationship somehow escalated into being something worse. For me, at the worst, it looked like getting chased up the stairs, getting called names, having things thrown at me, having my phone shattered, being told extremely disrespectful things. It looked like having somebody put their hands on me and wrestle me, getting cornered in rooms. But before all of that, before the escalation, I was in relationships that were emotionally unsafe, where I couldn't voice my needs. I couldn't voice the things that were important to me, the things that hurt me, or I simply just had to keep my mouth shut and keep my opinions to myself to keep the peace. Maybe for you, you don't recognize the extreme. And I know some of you do. I've spoken to you. But in the less extreme, it's sacrificing what you need for your partner, for your family. It's being the strong one, the independent one, the one that manages the room, the one that's adaptable or modifiable so that everything goes according to plan or so that everything goes right. And in the bad relationships for me, the ones that escalated, it went from something minor where I felt unsafe and disconnected to myself, but it was okay. I was fine. We had a lot of happy times. It went from those moments to situations that would escalate. In my experience, first it started with raised voices. There would be a lot of yelling. And then it became name calling. And then it was just shut the fuck up. That escalated into things getting thrown at me. First, it was just keys. And then it was my phone when I was naked in the shower. It became getting chased up the stairs or having things wrestled out of my hands. And none of it was okay. But it took years for that to escalate. And so if that's something that you resonate with, I want to pause for a second and tell you that it's not that you've tolerated that. In a sense, you have, but your calibration point, your reference point has moved over time. We don't compare what's happening now to what happened on day one, to what we would have ever tolerated. In those moments, the moments where you just don't feel seen or heard and you feel a little disconnected, gets compared to the raised voices. And then next, the name calling gets compared to the raised voices, not to the very beginning. Our reference point shifts over time with us, and we compare what we're currently experiencing to the last bad event that we've already tolerated or moved through. Because if we've gotten through it, if the system has survived it, it is considered acceptable. So if you're in a situation or a relationship where you're asking yourself that question, how did I get here again? Why do I tolerate this? This isn't okay. And you have moments of clarity and then moments of self-doubt. I want to let you know that one, I've been there, and it can be crazy making because you don't trust yourself. You stop believing yourself. And there's good times, and then there's these really bad times that escalate. And you tell yourself it's not okay. But then overnight, there's a reset switch, nothing gets resolved, and things go back to normal. And normal feels safe. We start to be able to breathe, and we're like, okay, we're out of that panic moment. And then in an attempt to prevent another panic moment, another escalation, you keep the status quo. You don't want to change anything. And as this cycle repeats, when that negative stimulus, that horrible situation that happens when things are escalating, when that is not present, when that is removed, it feels like a reward. It feels like positive reinforcement. And that's why small things like breadcrumbing or just not fighting, just absence of conflict, or a small conversation with dinner that doesn't end in a fight, that's why those things feel so magical or they feel so connecting, because your body is celebrating, this is safe, I can breathe, even though you're constantly on high alert waiting for the next shoe to drop. You're doing everything that you can to self-edit in the moment to avoid the next conflict. But the key there is no avoiding the next conflict. There's not even delaying it. That behavior to self-modify in an attempt to protect the self is our internal reasoning that we have control over something that we have zero control over. I thought for a very long time that I was able to control the situation and manage the room and prevent the explosions that were happening. And I didn't, because it was always a matter of time that no matter what I did, they came up again. So if you can relate that to the extremes, to abuse or to lack of emotional safety, high conflict, or if you can relate it just to having your needs not met over and over, or anytime you bring it up, you just throw your hands up and you walk away. I see you. And this is all the same pattern at different scale. So I found myself in this repeating pattern. And as I did the healing work, I stepped outside of the pattern to start observing it, and I studied it. I learned about our deepest voids and our core wounds. And in that process, I recognized that the childhood relationship that I had with my dad, I never addressed. We just moved on. And if you resonate with part of that story, maybe you grew up in chaos or where it wasn't safe or where there was high conflict and you never saw conflict resolved healthfully. Maybe there was high standard, high expectation. It had you feeling like you had to earn love. Those are part of the things that shape us in who we become, in the wounds and the voids that we have, and in how we love, in how we receive love, in how we value love or how we think it's perceived. I came to a breaking point in my patterns, in my relationships, and in one relationship, I could not go any further. It was killing me. So I left. I started doing more healing work. I learned about all of this and I went back. And what do you know? Things didn't change. So fast forward, go through more pain. And in that process, I had also started working on my self-worth. So where before I had always gotten small and shrank, this time I got mad. And that was new for me because in all of my relationship patterns, I had always felt inferior. I had never gotten mad. I had never seen myself worth enough that I was upset at how somebody was treating me, which just makes me want to hug the little girl that I used to be. So I left again. And if you're in that, if you're in a relationship like that and you keep repeating patterns or you keep going back or you've gone back or you say, I can't do this anymore, and you try to leave or you want to leave, but then you never do, or you do, and then you go back. I see you and I hear you, and leaving feels like you have to move mountains. So I want to share two stories. So the first story is one that reshaped my view of what was happening. I had tolerated all of the things that I told you before, and there was one moment where we were arguing in the kitchen. And at one point, he looked at the dishes in the sink and he said, "Those are your dishes, bitch." And I just paused because I was shocked. To me, that phrase, that sentence strung together in that way at that moment conveyed to me, this person does not respect me. And that was the first time I looked at it through a different lens. That was a pattern disrupt for me because I had tolerated the name calling. I had even thought myself that at some moments I deserve that, or that, maybe he was right and it was all my fault. Maybe I'm the problem. But in that moment, I heard pure and utter, I do not respect you. And then when I started looking through that filter at every other moment in that relationship, I realized this person has never respected me. They continue showing me signs of disrespect, and I've never called them a name. I've never thrown things. I've never done this and this and this, and I would never say that to them. I know I have approached every conversation with this intent and with love, and that changed it for me. In that moment, I knew it was over, and still I stayed. I stayed for another couple of months after that, before moving out. And then months later, I went back. And the moment that I hit my final hard stop, where I cut the tie for good, was when I realized that this person was willing to burn the ship with both of us in it, if it meant seeing me lose or seeing me hurt. This person was willing to burn down everything that we had built and worked for and start harming the things that we had sacrificed for. And that was something that I had pedestaled. And I thought that it was untouchable, that he would never, that he would hurt me, but he won't hurt this. And he did. And I realized in that moment, nothing was safe. I wasn't safe. My business wasn't safe. And I realized the time that I had spent in that relationship and in trying to control an outcome where I could walk away with some X, Y, and Z control over the variables so that I could start my new life in this certain way. I realized that all of that was bullshit. I realized that there's no controlling any of it, that people will do what they want, and that you can only account for yourself. So to say it more concisely, the moment that hit the hard stop for me, where I knew there was no going back, and I began taking actions that I could not go back from, actions that are irreversible, not just looking up the attorney, but contacting the attorney, meeting with the attorney, and getting things in motion. It was when I realized the things that I had held as untouchables weren't real. That was my projection of what I would do in his place, and it wasn't what he would actually do. So often we project who we want people to be onto them, and that's not who they are. That's not who they're showing us we are. And so we have this hope that somebody's either going to become the way that they were in the beginning of the relationship, or somebody's going to be the best version that we see in them if they can just get there. But that's because that's what we want. It benefits us. It's not actually about that person. It's what we would do in their position. So for you, maybe you've finally had enough. Maybe your moment is coming, or maybe it already came. Maybe for you, it's a pattern interrupt, like I had in the kitchen, where it resets the frame and you start to think about things differently. Or maybe it's something so extreme that it breaks your perception of who you thought this person was. But unless we step outside the pattern and begin to observe it, unless we can disrupt the pattern, the loop will keep repeating because we are led by our wounds and our voids. And so we keep going back to the flame because it's familiar, because it's the thing that our core wound wants and attracted. It's the familiarity. It reminds me of love from my childhood. It reminds me that love is earned. It gives me an opportunity to earn love. It shows me chaos, chaos I'm comfortable with, chaos I grew up with. And leaving feels earth-shattering because it's the unknown. It walks away from everything you have ever known, and your system will fight you tooth and nail. It'll feel like your body is imploding. Your system will be screaming to go back. But if you can get through that moment, you can get to the other side. If you go back to that moment, like when I did, nothing changes. Nothing long-term anyway. I ended up with the same problems, the same thoughts, the same opinions of the things that I knew I didn't accept, the things that I didn't like, the things that I didn't want to tolerate. And I did because I thought this time will be different. And if you've ever been in a situation like that in your relationships where you're repeating these relationship patterns, or maybe it's the same pattern over and over in the same relationship, but you just can't leave, you know that no matter how many friends and family give you the advice, it's not enough. It's not going to change anything. You've heard it all. You know what they're going to say. Maybe you stop even telling them what's going on because their perspectives don't actually change it. They might validate you because you feel the self-doubt and you know that what you're feeling and experiencing is not okay. And so it validates you when they agree with you and they say, you don't need to be there. But then for some reason you can't. Their perspectives will never change what you do in that relationship because of two reasons. Number one, it has to come from within. Otherwise, you will go back. If you leave because somebody else told you to, that's not on your own authority. You didn't make that decision. You didn't learn that lesson. And the second layer behind that is if you outsource your authority, that's part of the pattern running. You don't trust your own voice. You're being indecisive and you can't make the decision. You need to be the one that decides it. I tell my clients, if they ask me, should I do this or should I do this? I'm not going to make the decision for you and you don't get to outsource that to me. And for me, in those moments, the thing that I had feared the entire time, the thing that was so scary that I was afraid of, that was the worst case scenario, I actually ended up doing. And for me, that was walking away with nothing. That was walking away and giving that man everything. And when I did, I felt powerful. I didn't feel like the weak failure that I thought I would be. I wasn't alone like I thought I would be. I wasn't perceived socially like I thought I would be. Because for the most part, or really any time I've ever seen it, the worst case scenario that we have in our minds is always worse in our imagination. Anytime that I've ever executed and taken an action and had a worst case scenario in my head, it has not gone to that level. When I walked away from everything and it felt like I'm walking into a situation where I'm blowing up my life, it was the best thing I've ever done. I felt the most empowered that I ever have. And people who I didn't even expect to be in my corner and supporting me were going to war for me. People see your strength if you let them. And something that I learned in therapy along the way was in those cases, we stay for so long. And part of it is learned helplessness. We've learned that we can't do anything. For me, I got called a victim all the time. I got told that if I told anybody what was going on, I was just complaining. I was airing our dirty laundry and I was being a victim, and people would think that I was a victim. And that slowly became my narrative. I was afraid to tell people what was happening because I didn't want people to think that I was a victim. I didn't want people to think that I was weak. And in turn, I just tried to make myself stronger. And if you resonate with that, you are not weak. If you want to advocate for yourself and you want to do something for yourself to get out and get a better relationship or put yourself in a situation that sets you up for success and happiness in a life where you thrive and not one where you're miserable and abandoning yourself, that is not weak. You are not a victim. I've done a lot of hard things in my life, but the one that I'm most proud of is walking away with nothing, because that was the thing that I feared most, and I did it. And I know if you're standing at the threshold and you're looking at the cliff and you have all of these fears, I see you. But I also know your strength, and I know what you've been through. And I know that if you can handle what you've walked through, you can handle moving through it into the next step. If you need permission to trust yourself and to stop listening to that stupid self-doubt that just sucks the confidence and the decisions out of you, you have my permission, but you don't need it. On the other side of walking through that fear was freedom. And when I look back at that entire journey, at the entire situation, I think, what did I need? How did I feel? I felt so alone. I felt like I was weak. I felt like I was just struggling and treading water. And I didn't know how much longer I could tread water or where the shore was or if I was going to make it. And that's where sisterhood comes in. My mission now is to help women who are standing where I once stood. I want to help you walk through this. That's why I created the Sisterhood Walk. That's why I coach women, and we have a sisterhood of women who sees and supports each other. It's where women meet and move and connect, where we share our stories and our struggles, where we recognize the patterns in one another. And so that maybe I can start seeing something in myself that I didn't see before. Or I see the strength of a woman who walked through it. Or I encourage the woman who's walking through it right now. This is for the women that we have been and we are becoming, the versions of ourselves that we've continuously evolved through. Sisterhood is so hard to find as an adult, but it's so sacred and it's so necessary. So that's my story, what I've walked through, and that's why the Sisterhood Walk came to be. Because before the women that we are now, before the survival and the patterns and the identities that we had to adapt, we were the little girls, the ones who were misunderstood, the ones who weren't seen, the ones who had to survive, the ones who came to conclusions about how the world works. So this walk is for the women we became and the girls that we once were. I hope if you see the Sisterhood Walk in your city that you will join me on that walk. But in the meantime, keep walking the wild way home.